What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler coming to you from Radio Row at the Super Bowl in New Orleans, and joining me remote from the great nether regions of the West, it's Justis Mosqueda from ACME Packing Company. How are you, Justis?
Yeah, I'm great. I'm not at the Super Bowl. I
That's
see a
a
lot
great
of
thing. Well, it's probably a great thing considering viewpoints.
Well, it seems like people are having fun at night, and I do miss that part. So
There's some of that going on, no doubt about it. Though it's been tempered so far, but I'm sure it's going to pick up starting tonight. And speaking of picking up, I hear I might have you to blame for this, but it sure seems like the idea is picking up steam in the greater Packers blogosphere that, the Green Bay Packers are hosting the draft upcoming this spring. And because of that, with the news that Myles Garrett might become available, well, the Packers could trade their first-round pick and probably a bunch of other stuff for one Myles Garrett. But they could never do that because the Packers would not allow them to. Mark Murphy would not allow Brian Gutekunst to make a trade with his first-round pick because the Packers fans assembled in Green. Feels like a far-fetched theory, sir, but I'm going to allow you the floor to kind of tell me what you think about this.
So this has happened before. The Kansas City Chiefs, when they were hosting the draft at the trade deadline the year prior, right? They were looking for a pass rusher, and they were willing to give up a first-round pick for it. Ownership came down and said, "You are not trading that first-round pick. We are hosting the draft." That is part of the whole point, right? You get one draft pick that first day. Whether or not the Packers would stand in the way of that, I think is up for debate, but it has happened in the past. I don't know how many times the team that's hosted the draft has traded away that first round pick.
I don't think it's happened yet, if I can remember. I'm just pulling from memory here, but I don't think it's happened. So
I think it is possible. The one thing too is this better than I as someone who grew up in Wisconsin, right? Like this is supposed to be like a proof of concept type of thing for the viability of can Green Bay host these type of events. And I know people have already pointed out, I know Matt Schneidman has made the jokes this week that he's people are already selling parking lot spots across from Lambeau Field for the draft, and it's only February. I know people who are our friends in the industry are like, wait, hold up. I'm going to have to rent a car and all these things for
where
this.
Am I going to stay? Right.
Yeah,
right.
Dude, it's not even just you have to rent a car. Mark Murphy was out here talking about people might have to be coming from Milwaukee to Green Bay and making the trip every single day. Right. So
that's happening. That's 100% happening. They have a special train being set up to bring people from Milwaukee to Green Bay. Yes, that is 100% happening.
So you're talking about all these factors, and then on top of that, people might not show up on Thursday because you don't have a draft pick. I don't know.
People will show up. That's ridiculous. People will show up. It's a party regardless. I mean, this idea that Murphy is going to tell Brian Gutekunst, you can't trade away that pick. To me, he's got it's. You talk about proof of concept. There is some aspect there, but also this is the biggest thing that's undoubtedly the biggest event that'll have happened in Wisconsin.
Yeah, more people
will probably be the biggest event. I mean, EAA is one thing where people can camp out right on a huge field and they all come in. That's 200,000-300,000 strong, and Oshkosh handles that. This is, like you're pointing out, very going to be much more spread out. I mean, the NFL's already taken all the hotel rooms in the Green Bay area. I mean, good luck if you're booking stuff now. But I just want to play a real 30-second clip here from Brian Gutekunst. We asked him about this actually back on Packer Transplants this past spring, and here was his response.
I think the one thing about the draft, it's funny. I've gotten a lot of questions about it. And it's so funny because I'm not going to be involved in any of that stuff with the exception of what we're doing with the picks. And
I mean, he knows what they're doing as far as the draft and utilizing the picks, and everything else is entertainment, right? And I understand that, yes, the Chiefs situation, and it all comes down to what do you think of Mark Murphy? That's point blank, right? Do you think Mark Murphy is the kind of guy who's going to say that kind of thing? I don't. Your mileage may vary. And I already know, Justis, I already know how this is going to go. I already know it. At some point here in the run-up to the draft, Mark Murphy and probably Brian are going to be asked about it, right? Probably Brian at the Combine, Mark whenever he's available for draft festivities. They're going to be asked about it. They're going to say absolutely not. Brian's in total control. He has no hand. Like no one's telling him what to do. And then everyone will respond, what do you expect them to say? And then the draft will happen, right? And it'll be that first night, and he won't trade away that pick, and they will make a selection, and everyone will say, see, he had to make that pick, even though we'll have no idea realistically what the truth is. But I just want to spare everybody because that's the road we're about to go down these next 2 months or so.
Well, the good news is if we're going to be talking about moving that first round pick, right, there's very few players who are worth a first round pick.
Exactly.
One of them is Myles Garrett, and Myles Garrett has a roster bonus that's like, I think it's like the 5th day of the new league year, so that's going to happen early March. So it's not going to be relevant. Like it's not going to be one of those draft day things where who was it? Was it Hollywood Brown and AJ Brown? Like both of them were they got traded on draft day, and they just like bring them out onto the stage. Like
right.
Myles
can
Garrett.
you imagine?
The pop,
right.
The pop would be amazing.
The pop would be amazing.
The timing,
live
the
shot
timing
would
of the
be incredible.
The timing of the contract, it's not going to happen,
Right.
but the pop would be amazing.
Now, speaking of it, let's pull back and talk about the viability of the trade itself, or just like operations as far as around the idea of Gutekunst talking about essentially signaling a bit of a new phase, right? It's time to get back to competing for championships. He didn't say that lightly, right? That's a signal to everybody that it's time to, quote unquote, step it up, I think, anyway. Now, do you think that makes him more aggressive in this draft and maybe more likely to make this kind of move? Forget Garrett in particular, but like, you know how the Packers have operated these last couple of years. He has garnered and gathered a boatload of picks, both of these past 2 drafts. Do you think he continues down that path, or do you think he gets a little bit more frisky?
Yeah, I don't think his statement necessarily means anything, but I think just like that kind of reflects where the roster is in general. Like to your point,
Right.
like the past really 3 off seasons, they haven't really been able to do that much outside of like, I mean, they really threaded the needle with the Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs signings, right? But I mean, they've made like something like 36 draft picks in the last 3 years. I mean, the reason that they had to do the whole Malik Willis thing is because they swung and missed on 2 draft pick quarterbacks, and they did that because they didn't have any money for a veteran backup quarterback, right? Like they didn't have cap space, and now you look at kind of the spot that their roster is in right now. If they wanted to play a game with the guys that they had from 2024 coming back for 2025, they could do it today.
Yep.
Like they have 46 guys under contract between the 53-man roster and the guys who ended the season on the IR. And I understand, like, okay, maybe Jair Alexander doesn't come back depending on what the contract situation looks like and stuff like that. But I don't know if like we're getting all this cap space. Outside of McManus, I don't know if there's any like one free agent that you have to like.
That's the thing, right? Like TJ Slayton is the one guy that you might say, okay, it'd be nice to have him back, but I don't think he's a must sign.
Right, for sure. And they're losing the least amount of snaps in terms of any team going into free agency. They've been the youngest team in the NFL the past 2 seasons. They got all these guys under contract. They're getting all this cap space. They don't need it to retain anyone. And they still have, a full. I think they're going to be slated for 8 draft picks because they're getting a comp pick for, I think, Nyman. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's just time to be aggressive because if not, you're going to spend these draft picks and these guys.
And that's the thing, right?
Picks on, they're just going to get cut.
Somebody's going to get kind of cut as far as like, I love the idea of, he always talks about breeding competition, right? It's all about competition in the room and making guys better. And I love that approach. But to your point, at some point, aren't you just kind of eating yourself? Especially if you have all these young guys who are all on rookie deals. Like where's the advantage if you're just all of those guys are competing with each other and you're having to like shed them essentially when you come out of the summer. So I'm with you on that. I do think it makes sense to get a bit more aggressive here.
And when people talk about like big extensions coming up too, I'm like, okay, well, 1, they might move off of Jair. 2, they might move off of Kenny, right? Relatively soon. That creates some cap space. You already paid the quarterback. Like Zach Tom is going to get paid. Okay, sounds good.
That's the one, right?
I don't know if like
no doubt
is Rasheed Walker going to get extended. Like I don't know if he is or isn't. Like it might be Jordan Morgan at left tackle next season. I don't know. Like so, it now is the time where it's like if you want to infuse this team with talent, I think it makes a lot of sense. And Myles Garrett's the big one right now, obviously because he requested a trade and. Defensive player of the year are not available a lot.
Not
So, yeah.
usually, no.
Yeah. So I think he makes a lot of sense. I will say, like, if they could find a big wide receiver who can run, because I don't know if you could play another
Yes.
small guy with Jaden Reed. I think we saw
Mhm.
how that kind of worked out at the end when we had like Bo Melton out there trying to run block for
Yeah.
these Jaden Reed jet sweeps and stuff, and he was
And
getting
it's
beat
funny
with
too.
blocks.
That's their MO too, right? Like going back to Ron Wolf, they want big guys who can work over the middle, elements turn. They want those bigger receivers. That's always been the target as far as their personnel group goes, right? And I think you're right. Like, it'd be nice to find one in the draft, sure, but it wouldn't surprise me if they went the free agency route this year.
Yeah, or like if like DK becomes available. Like if DK
Like a
becomes available,
trade,
that's
yeah,
like a
right.
guy. That's the kind of guy that they need. I mean, really, what they need is Christian Watson, but Christian Watson's going to be out until week 12, as Bob said.
He's
So
at least right, yeah.
yeah. And then who knows what he's going to look like when he comes back? I mean, if you need a guy to run off full speed, like, is he going to be able to do that as soon as he hits the field in week 12? Like, I don't know.
Well, and maybe he is, but he's. I mean, just because you're back doesn't mean you're back, right? It almost always takes a bit of a run to get back into that shape. My thinking has been kind of always since the injury happened, like, yeah, he might come back at the end of next year, get what you can, no doubt, out of him. But I got to suspect he's not right as rain until the following season. And who knows what happens there?
You just gotta assume. You got to assume that you're getting zero out of because you can't bank on it. You just can't bank on getting anything out of it. And
although Justis, this is the personnel group that said, "Hey, we've got Eric Stokes. We're fine at corner." So I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm holding my breath a little bit on that regard, but we'll see going forward. Justis, cannot thank you enough for the time, man. Make sure you're checking out his work at ACME Packing Company. We'll link to it in the description of this video. Justis, thanks so much, man.
Yes, sir. Anytime.